I'm Melanie Johnson along with my co-host Jen Foster. We are both 13-time best-selling authors. We've published over 2,500 books and made all of our authors #1 bestsellers. We own Elite Online Publishing. If you want to become a best-selling author, look us up at eliteonlinepublishing.com. Now, welcome to the podcast that shares secrets from top industry experts that show you how to get lasting success and results. This is the Elite Expert Insider Podcast. Hi, everyone. It's Melanie Johnson here along with Jen Foster. Hey, Jen.
Hey, everyone. How's it going?
All right. So we're talking podcasting today. Of course, we've had our podcast for like 5 years, but we want to know the inside secrets, how to get the top 100 on iTunes. We do that for our authors. We make you a #1 bestseller on Amazon. We have the secret sauce. Today, we've brought you Jay Wong, who has the secret sauce on how to get to the top 100 on iTunes. I got my notebook ready. I am ready to figure out what he does and learn everything. Not only do you get to the top 100, he's saying you can monetize it and make a lot of money. So first, before I introduce Jay, I want to make sure you subscribe to our podcast, leave us a comment and share it, because I know you know other people who have a podcast, who want to have a podcast, and they should all be listening to this today. So make sure you subscribe. Jay Wong, thanks for coming today. We know we have the superstar expert in making you the top 100 in iTunes for your podcast. Thanks for coming on our show.
Yeah, Melanie, Jen, I'm pumped to be here. All that pre-interview, in the green room, it just got me excited, and I can't wait to dive in and have this conversation with you both.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay, for being here. So tell us a little bit about how Podcast Your Brand started and how you got into podcasting.
If you would have asked me 5-6 years ago and said, Jay, you're going to run this, badass podcast agency. You're going to work with brands like P&G. You're going to work with Inc. 5000 companies and some of the, these thought leaders. I would have thought you would be absolutely crazy, because back then I was just this, first of all, I had just taken this trip in Asia. I was vagabonding in Asia. I was kind of going through what I call my quarter life crisis. And I was really just figuring out how to do anything online, how to be able to build an audience, how to be able to build an email list. How do you actually even monetize any audience? And podcasting was like the last thing on the list that I tried. And, we tried blogging, we tried, all sorts of different funnels, we tried YouTube. And there was just something about voice, something about hitting record and being able to be able to, create genuine, raw content that I just loved. And for me, I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by a couple different mentors in Toronto. And I kind of took a little bit of strategy from one person, a little bit of strategy from the other. And we just kind of mixed in our own strategy. And to my surprise, when I launched my own podcast, The Inner Changemaker, this is back in late 2015, so very different landscape than right now, we were able to hit the top 100 for Canada. We were able to hit top 100 for the US for all the relevant categories that we wanted to go after. And that really is how things started, right? I got my first 50 email subscribers, which to me was a very big deal back then. That was not like my mom or my girlfriend or a friend that I was like, hey, I know your email list and I'm going to throw you on this email list. It was actually new people that were tuning in and listening to some of the interviews and content. And actually from there, that's actually where, I got invited to speak at different podcast conferences. We figured out that people actually wanted to launch and get into the top 100. So we did the whole gambit of things, right? Courses, 2-day intensives, tried so many different offers. And once again, the agency was actually the last offer that we ever tested. I would have never came up with it. And a lot of times it was actually my own clients that was saying, Jay, we love all this stuff, but if there was a way that we could write you a bigger check, number one, right? And number two, if you and your team could literally just do all the things that I really don't want to be able to do, right? I just want to be able to show up. I want to be able to record, and I want to be able to know that we have a strategy to be able to monetize this. If you could just fill in the gaps, everything from beginning to end, we'll write you a bigger check and let's do it. Right. And so that's kind of how, and that was 2.5 years ago, less than 2.5 years ago. And ever since then, we haven't really looked back. We've just been focused on the agency because we know that it creates the best possible results for our clients. And, that's something that, I stand by.
So what's the difference? Like, I mean, if you have, everyone's like, oh, I have a podcast, but getting to that top 100, why is that so important instead of just having your podcast up there? What are the benefits of having that, being that top 100?
So Melanie, I love that you bring this up because I know that, we're just geeking out a little bit about how you guys get people into the top,
Yeah, and we get the
for the
same question all the time. Well, why do I need to be number one? No number one bestseller. What do I get for that? So what do I get for being the top 100?
look, everything comes down to how do we increase and position the brand and position the thought leader for greater chances of success, right? And so by hitting the top 100, is it because that you're getting that many more downloads? Is it because it's a vanity metric, right? I look at it as if you're going to spend that much time, that much energy, I imagine it's even more for a book, right? But if you're going to spend all this time, all this energy, you're going to make this investment in the content. You want to be able to share your number one, your best tips. You want to share your best content. Let's create the biggest splash. Let's create the biggest splash upon your launch.
Mm-hmm.
And just for context sake, internally, our team, we refer to hitting the top 100 as the end of phase one, right? And so it's not the end all be all. It's not like we have a terrible podcast. If we didn't hit the top 100, let's just call it quits after 3 episodes. Like, it's not that either. But we believe that if you're going to spend that much energy on the front end, it's an amazing opportunity to draw in your community, people in your network. It's about elevating not just you, but the platform that
Mm-hmm.
you've created and the positioning that it helps with your future guests, right? It's always nice for people to say, hey, we're doing this podcast, but it's a little nicer when they go, oh, we're doing this top 100 podcast. I get to be able to get my voice heard on even a bigger platform. So we try to think in terms of like win-wins,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, for so many of our clients that have great backends, that have digital offerings or services or different products, it makes it even that much better for their customers because people want to be able to support people winning, right? People want to be able to support progress. People want to be able to support momentum, and I think for so many different thought leaders and visionaries out there, like momentum is practically like oxygen.
How long do you stay at the top 100? Is it something once you hit, then you can sustain it? Or does it gradually, there's attrition and it goes back down? Like I know with book publishing, we say, hey, you're going to score a touchdown on the first play of the game. So we kick you into that end zone and then we try and keep you in that, 10, 20 yard line of scoring repeatedly. So how does that work with podcasting?
This is another brilliant question because this comes up so often, and I imagine for you guys as well. Yes, 100%. We get people, typically they hit the top 100 within that first 2 to 3 weeks on their launch. It's a really big celebration. It's a massive momentum boost for everybody. For them at that point, unless there's a paid ads typically strategy or their audience is relative, they have a lot of social capital in it, then the podcast typically dips out of the top 100 or 200. We focus a lot of times from there on the ROI side of things. But then every so often, so typically between every 3 to 6 months, we could put together a campaign. So even for you guys that have been podcasting for 4 or 5 years, we help our clients put together those campaigns. So once again, do a bit of a launch campaign, almost as if they're relaunching, right? Mm-hmm. And now we're back into that top 100, top 200 position so that you're consistently you're dipping into the top of it. But really for us, it's not really the end game. We want to make sure that they have an amazing show. And based on the content that they have on that show, that we can create some great trackable ROI from it.
I love that. So would you say all businesses should have a podcast and be on the top 100, or do you need to have a specific type of business or a specific niche in order to have a podcast? Or to be on the top 100?
So this is, I think, I don't know if you guys will agree, but I get asked this question often enough where I've thought about this. And I'm not a big believer that every business should have a podcast just because it is this amazing channel, just because, it's certainly where a lot of attention, we can all pull up the statistics, right? People are listening to podcasts, I think over 6.5 hours every single week, on average 6 podcasts. You can look at all that and logically you would think, okay, from a business standpoint, this could be a great marketing and sales channel for us, right? But I think fundamentally, you have to ask the thought leader, you have to ask yourself or the business owner, do I actually like audio? Do I enjoy this type of content creation? Because I don't think it's for everybody, right? I think, just like how YouTube strategies would be different than Instagram strategies and how those would be a little different than TikTok and how all of those would be very different for podcasting. Don't forget, podcasting is about the rawness of the conversation, the authenticity. I'm not even using that as a marketing type of move, right? But how can we, have an amazing real live conversation, and how can we make sure that the listener feels like they're listening to something that they shouldn't even be having access to, right? And it's like some of those like nuance and some of those ingredients, I think for even, your listeners, when they hear things like that, that's where it goes, wow, this is amazing. I'm going to listen to it again. And this is where we track consumption rates. And we typically have a lot of our clients' episodes have over 100% consumption rates, right? 120, 150. And that a lot of time means that the content was so good that people went back and listened to it. So I think fundamentally, to answer that question, do you actually like audio? Do you like having longer form, on the fly kind of conversations like this, right? Does that suiting for, your personality? And I think if you happen to find yourself listening to a podcast like this or listening to different shows, then it doesn't matter almost like what the business is. There's a way for us to be able to create an ROI strategy depending on how fast and how big that business wants to be able to grow.
Okay, so we get asked this all the time. How do you hit number one, right? Like they want our secret sauce. So we give them like a little bit of the secret sauce just to give them an idea of what we do. So give us a little bit of your secret sauce, tease us enough where then everyone wants to hire you to do the rest. But, tell us a little bit about what your strategy is.
So I think it's pretty similar because I've compared notes with, I'm in a couple different, masterminds where, there are people that helping, individuals get their book into really great rankings. There's people helping your YouTube channel be really able to take off. I think one thing to note is that there's different algorithms, right? As in YouTube has a different algorithm, iTunes has a different algorithm, which is, by the way, very different than Spotify's algorithm. Spotify just came up with their charts just a couple months ago at the time of recording this. But it's not numbered, right? And truth is, probably between 80 to 90% of your traffic is going to come from just those two destinations, right? And the TikTok algorithm is different. For us, in terms of iTunes, we want to be able to drive as many subscriptions right on that front end, because that is a very key metric. It's not the only metric, but it's certainly a key metric, right? There are other things that we take into consideration depending on how much social capital our client has, depending on what are the pockets of audiences that they already have, email list, community, right? We want to be able to take a look at that. But one big thing is definitely driving subscriptions, but then it's not the only thing, right? Because if you just did that, it's only isolated on iTunes. How can we get all of your podcasts, those assets, those micro assets, how can we get them on all of the right platforms for your audience? And so that's something that we ultimately custom design per client. And we're able to have a lot of different shows. Even just this month, I was sharing with you guys off record, we had a relationship show hit the top 100. We had an alternative health show hit the top 100. Even just those two, those are very different like marketplaces, right? Yeah. One is listed under society and culture. One is listed into health, arguably two of the most competitive, marketplaces, right? But the strategy is a bit different depending on the industry and depending on what the goals are for our clients.
Does it depend on, like you say, you have to pick a certain episode. Like we do interviews with people. So do you have to have like a compelling interview? Like should you be careful about the show or shows that you're picking to promote to get to that top 100?
I think, look, I think one of the things that gets missed by a lot of podcasters is getting that buy-in from some of their guests, right? To be able to promote on their behalf. Because I think what ends up happening is they'll do all sorts of interviews and they'll think it's amazing. The conversations feel really good. They seem like they get a sense of fulfillment from it, right? But right, whenever, let's say you're interviewing, me right now, I'm sharing that within my own network or my email lists, right? That's going to be new traffic for you guys, and it doesn't matter how big my audience is. Let's just say it's 1,000 people for argument's sake. That's probably 1,000 people though. That's it's relevant, that we're sharing, because chances are they're following us because of all the podcast strategies and all those. So we do train our clients into there are these nuanced things that they're doing during the interviews, and especially in the post-production of the interview to essentially get that buy-in. But I think to your point, it's also the content. What are the actual content pieces that we're releasing with to really hook the listener? Right? Because this is one of the things we always have to coach all our CEOs and all the thought leaders we work with, which is we're not just getting you trained up to hop on the mic and creating content. That's one side of it, but you need to train your audience a lot of times to actually be able to receive content from you. Right? So, and this is where it's like, oh, let's just say we have 10 episodes. Let's just release with all 10. I guarantee you that launch is not going to be as effective, and you're not really maximizing all 10 assets, as well as a more customized approach where we're leading the customer from one to the next, really creating that binge listen type of effect, right? Which I think where a lot of this is where a lot of thought leaders and business owners fall short of, because it's almost like they copy you on the front end of it, right? But then it's some of those other pieces, the follow through from one to the next. That's really where the connection gets missed.
Yeah, I see that in our podcast for sure. So I want to ask you a question real quick. Sorry, Melanie, because you talked about it a while ago about the social capital. So I don't know for sure if everyone understands what that means. So explain what does that mean, social capital?
Yeah. So we've worked with clients where they came to us, they had 1.5 Instagram followers, they had another, 50,000 on YouTube, right? And that's just a lot of social capital from social media. Another clients that sometimes we work with, hey, they don't have any of these social media assets, but they themselves, their network, they're a part of some of these groups, whether it's Genius Network, Strategic Coach, right? YPO, EO, they're a part of these groups. So they have a lot of social capital from that regard, right? It's about how do we leverage, the little pockets of audiences that they do have, right? One little caveat I will say on this is our client that did have 1.5 million subscribers, she got a little upset at us right upon the launch because she was expecting she's going to have millions of downloads, right? But I think the beauty of podcasting is that it actually segments your audience for you. Out of that 1.5, that, very easy for them to engage with content that's 15 seconds or a photo or what have you. Yeah. How many of them are willing to listen to a half an hour conversation, right? How many of them are willing to spend 10 minutes and dive deeper with you on a certain strategy or a certain IP, right? And, when she was looking at her numbers and we were breaking this down with her, these are not just your downloads that we're looking at. We're looking at, these are people that are most likely to work with you on a membership, most likely to work with you on your coaching, most likely to work with you on your mastermind, right? These are the people that you have their attention, long form, and I think going a little off tangent here, I think that's just one of the things that I think of whenever, people talk about previous audiences or social capital.
Okay, so I want to go back to training your audience. So should you have a preview, on TV shows? My background is television. And at the end of the show, you'd always say, coming up next week is blah, blah, blah. And here's the preview of the next week's episode. So should you be training your audience to say, because the way we do ours, we don't necessarily know what the show is coming afterwards for us to tag it, but I guess we could edit something in there. Should you be prompting them to, hey, and then we've got this great show, and maybe it's just another show that you have that make sure you tune in and see this other show. What do you think about that?
There's a reason why one of the most popular genres for TV shows in general, is these reality TV shows, right? And regardless of your feelings towards reality TV, if you just sit there from a marketing lens and you look at how they go about promoting it, right? How they go about creating that, I got to tune in next week, or I got to binge this whole season because it's so good, right? And to be honest, I think it's a lot of human nature, where it's, we're in this world where from Netflix to Hulu to Amazon Prime, that people have access to full seasons of things, right? So we don't like to wait around. We want to be able to access the good things. So it's about taking that philosophy, right? But then how does that make sense for the brand and the back end of your business, right?
Right.
Are you working with us because you want more downloads and you want more listeners? Or are you interested in growing and actually leveraging audio as a sales channel? Those are two very different things. I recently went through, I was sitting through a YouTube kind of like course. One of my friends was putting it on, and one of their kind of like little hacks, I know we're not talking about YouTube, it just kind of came to my mind, is that when they're trying to get more subscribers, more people on the channel, right? They'll say, hey, after you're done watching this video, right, go and watch this specific video, because that's going to be like a nice little part two, or that's going to fill in the gap over there, right? Very type of like binge, watching, right? And so how can we take these strategies from a high level, but apply it, right, into a podcast? And I think when you think of the technology that's available today and the ability to add dynamic ads, as an example, to your show, right? Now that call to action doesn't only need to be, hey, listen to the previous episodes of this podcast, which it certainly can be. It can also be, hey, here, if this is of interest to you, here's where you could go to do a step 2 or step 3 with our team to see if we can even apply this in your business.
Very good. I don't know why I didn't get that sooner. I'm from the TV industry, like, duh, like,
It's one of the things that and it's about looking at trends, patterns, right? And I forgot who told me this, but it's like so much innovation comes out from looking at different industries that's not your own, right? And just taking some of their best practices. Right now, like today, we have some of the world's biggest companies. And the reason we know this is because we got a chance to work with Procter and Gamble earlier this year, launching their alumni network podcast. Right. And from that, started a whole series of conversations around these Fortune 1000 companies. They're not looking to launch podcasts, right? Their brand equity is like through the roof, right? Millions of customers. We're talking like world's biggest companies here. For them, they want to leverage podcasting from a private podcasting standpoint. And the pitch on the private podcasting standpoint is, hey, let's just use this as the same thing we would use to update our employees and team members, right? Yeah. Internal communications play, right? And so when we work with clients that have a customer journey that's 2 or 3 years, when we work with franchises, right, that they want people to renew and pay those franchise fees every single year, okay, how can we leverage that internal communication strategy, private podcasting strategies, but also apply it on an external channel, right? And so this is a lot of like geeking out, but it's once again, it's really based on that business model of that thought leader. Where is it that they want to go? How big do they actually want to go? Right. And then being able to say, hey, this is what I think would work best based on, your custom vision.
Yeah. Let's talk about ROI again. So how do you know when's the right time? You've had a podcast. When do you know you should start selling advertising or have advertising on your show? Or when do you have to have so many downloads? Do you have to have so many followers or subscribers? Like, how does that all work? And is the advertising the only way to have ROI on a podcast?
Okay.
Lots of questions.
I love this question. And let me set some context around this, which is when I was speaking at podcasting conferences, anywhere from 2016 to 2018, monetization, every single time you bring up this word ROI, right, it would get the most people in the room. People, if there was out of seats, people are standing in the back, right? People are standing in the corner. They want to know, how the heck do we use this to make more money, right? And I'm going to say right now, like on record, okay, that the traditional monetization strategies that radio uses and big shows uses. So for example, if you're going to use Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan as an example, that's probably not going to be a very good example for you. It's the equivalent of, I'm starting out in my business, I'm trying to make, I don't know, 6 figures, right? My mentor's a billionaire. Not that the billionaire can't teach you a thing or two. Certainly he or she can, right? But not as applicable and relevant given the stage of where you're at, right? Does that, I hope that makes sense. So the reason I bring this up is because this is where I feel like the industry gets it wrong, where you're trying to build up this show, this audience, this listenership. And you know what people say at these podcasting conferences around monetization? They say, you got to build up the audience. It's going to take on average 2 to 3 years, right? You got to figure out what they want. You got to build the offer. You got to get, it's like creating another sales team from what you're already doing to just go pitch for a few $100s. To me, it makes no sense. And I am not a big believer of this model. And we have seen our clients do it completely. Like, we have abandoned that model and we have said, how can we leverage the content that we're creating, the medium that we have, right? Forget the downloads, because we as much as we track that, we're actually looking for consumption, right? We're actually looking for where are the ones that it's hitting a nerve for our clients. And how can we leverage the content we're creating to drive higher services and higher product sales? And this is the reason why some of our clients report are having, being able to close 30, 50, 6-figure deals from their podcast, because we don't just leverage it from a traditional monetization standpoint. It becomes really a standalone asset, so much so that they can hand it off to a sales team member, right? And that sales team member could say, hey, we had this amazing conversation. I thought you could get some great value from this 10-minute audio or this message from our CEO, right? And that is moving the conversation along from a sales perspective, rather than let's try to, play the numbers game. Because chances are, especially if you're a thought leader today, regardless of book, how much social media presence you have, you're not probably going to be able to hit some of these bigger numbers, not because you're not good, but because you're probably not going to be a part of like a social network, or a podcast network. You're probably not Joe Rogan, who's done this for 10 plus years, right? And so how do we get you some great wins right off the bat? And I'm just a believer that you don't have to wait 2 to 3 years. You don't have to have this massive show. Some of our best clients that have 8-figure businesses that have amazing ROI on their podcast have very, very tiny shows, right? But it's not really about the amount of downloads. It's really what you do with the content.
So true. And I think that's my brother always makes fun of me. He goes, you have like 10 views on YouTube. I'm like, it's not about that, dude. It's it's about exactly what you just said. It's like, let me walk you down the one client that we got from there that referred 2 other clients, and those clients referred 2 other clients to us just from that one interview. That's what it all comes to. It's just leveraging it and leveraging the content. And we're really big about repurposing content. And, it's like, how can you repurpose that to send it to individual people that can add value and raise your brand level?
100%. And I love that you bring up repurposing, because I think people could get very creative here, and I'll just give you an example right off the bat, mostly because I saw the email this morning. One of our clients, they said, we just had an amazing, morning meeting. And in fact, we want to be able to use maybe not the whole recording, right? But a good chunk of that recording to be able to tell for people that couldn't make the meeting, but then 2, we want to also remind our listeners. Because really, a podcast, what is a podcast? It's an ongoing conversation, right? It's like seeing that friend that, you guys watch movies together, and every single time you get together, it's like, oh my God, I saw this movie, or oh, hey, I'm watching this show, right? That's an ongoing conversation, And so it's them with their ongoing conversation of, these are some of our values. This is how we run our team. These are some of the things that we stand for. Right. So it's really getting our clients to move away from, hey, let's just create, content, right? Like, what is content? Content is really just a change in perspective, right? Content is just adding my 2 cents, And so how can we get creative with doing that? And I love that you guys told me earlier, right? You guys did, even successful webinars or what have you, and being able to repurpose parts and pieces of that, sometimes makes a world of difference as well.
Yeah, I'm even thinking that, so this is the book that we did from our podcast, became a webinar, became a book. But now I'm thinking the webinar should become a podcast. Like, I think we should reverse engineer it. You just gave me the idea. It's like, okay, well, we did a webinar. Why isn't the webinar should be like 2 or 3 podcasts out of that? So
Yeah. Or like the webinar in itself, you
Yeah.
guys could use this, right? Where I'm telling it to you. So the webinar itself, maybe that's just a mini series, right? Based on the topic of the podcast, right? Hey, listeners, we're going through these next 4 episodes. This is a little bit of a mini series, right?
Yeah.
And so once again, do you just use that once on an external channel? We just blast it out, we put it there and we move on, right? Which is what a lot of business owners end up doing anyways. Or could we leverage it for the next time you run the webinar, right? Could we leverage it in those indoctrination emails? Could we leverage it as, could you get as creative as, hey, I'm going to send, this prospective client all of the recordings on a USB, right? And be able to gift that to them, because, hey, look, in the world that we are living in today, it's noisier than ever. Right? Attention, we're competing with elections, the news, the world's falling apart. Like it's madness, right? And on top of that, there's record people releasing podcasts, there's record people releasing books, right? It's easier than ever. People just speak into a phone and Anchor is going to take care of everything. And that's just like, we're going to move on, right? So it's about how do we create, how do we go back to creating those special experiences? Right? Yeah. How do we do that for our listeners? How do we do that for our prospective clients? And I think ultimately that's kind of our sweet spot, working with thought leaders and individuals that have something to say, right? Have amazing content, but they understand that they want to be able to grow an amazing brand, an amazing business. So to perpetuate their mission and their values even further.
Yeah. I think we could talk about this all day.
I know.
But I think let's wrap up, and Jay, tell people where they can go to find out more about you and how they can get to the top 100.
So we dived into pretty much a good chunk of our process, but in case you want to see our entire process broken down, it's called the top 100 buyers, because that's really what we want to help companies be able to do, kind of imitate their best buyers over and over again. You can get access to that whole training at doneforyoupodcast.co. And if you want to see some more case studies and see what I'm up to, you can follow me at podcastyourbrand.co, and all our social channels are there, and you'll be able to see it all and socially stalk me as appropriately as you want.
All right, so I'm going to take your advice, and I'm going to tell people that we had a great show. And if you would like to see another one of our shows, we have Laurel Langmeyer, the Millionaire Maker. So she is also a podcaster, but she will teach you how to make millions. So look up her show, The Millionaire Maker, on our podcast, Lead Expert Insider. Make sure you subscribe to our show and grab our book, Podcast Authorize, and we'll help make you a #1 best-selling author. We'll see you next time right here. Have a great week.
Bye. Thanks, Jay.
Hey, are you looking to increase your revenue, build credibility, and elevate your brand? This podcast is brought to you by Elite Online Publishing, an innovative publishing and full spectrum marketing company. They will publish and market your book to make it a #1 bestseller. Becoming an author is the best way to market your business. So contact them at eliteonlinepublishing.com today. All of their authors become #1 bestsellers.